Let's start off there in verse 4. And he starts off by saying this. He says, when the time, notice it's not just a time, when the set time had fully come. And so we talked about this last week. Remember, we said that like God put that date when Jesus was going to be born like on his calendar. And so for generations in the past, they had hoped, they had prayed, they had waited for, they had anticipated the coming of this Messiah that was promised in the Old Testament. And so they waited, they couldn't wait, but they waited hundreds and hundreds of years, generation after generation. And so he says in verse 4, when the fullness of the time came, when the date came, God sent his son, born of a woman. Now don't pass by that. That's very significant. Born of a woman. Think about that. So you've got a guy who has known the woman. You've got a guy who's known the apostles that walked with Jesus and knew about his life. You've got a guy who sat down and he has meditated and understands the exact events surrounding the birth and the resurrection and the crucifixion, everything of Jesus' life. I mean, you think about how romanticized it is. You think about how commercialized Christmas is for us, right? It's plastic figures and it's drawings and it's somebody who built some wooden deal that you've seen at church with some hay and some kids dressing up in bathrobes to reenact this, right? And it's these plastic people that look a whole lot more like you and me than they do look like first century people. But the fact is that's a huge deal for Paul to say, man, that's a phenomenal miracle. That's an amazing thing that Jesus would be born of a virgin, conceived by the Holy Spirit. So don't pass by that without understanding the grandiosity of that. But when the set time had fully come, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under law. He says. Now that's important because Jesus, when he was born as a little bitty baby, he was subjected to all of the law. Now what are you talking about there? Well, I'm talking about the law of God. I'm talking about primarily the Mosaic law, like the 10 commandments and the 600 and something commandments listed in the Old Testament, given from Moses on Mount Sinai to come down to the Jews. And so Jesus was under that. He was accountable to that law.